Namaskar. The Russia-Ukraine crisis keeps turning a new page almost every other day. The latest addition to what is already becoming a catastrophe is the blowing up, the breaching of a particular dam on the river Dnieper, and the consequent release of water downstream, which now threatens to submerge everything in its way. Many people have been affected, communities have been affected, and now we also know that at a large scale, flora and fauna and the natural ecosystem will also bear the severe brunt of this, what can only be termed a terrorist action. Hello and welcome to StudyIQ English IAS. I am Bhuvan Apurvajha. As in this presentation, today we will take a look at the Kakhovka Dam and thereafter the subsequent release of water into what is undeniably an ecologically sensitive area. What are the species that are threatened with as a result of this terrorist activity, and what could possibly be the way ahead in terms of mitigation of risk in this area for the days to come. Straight away, let's jump into the topic, and straight away let's look at the facts of the case here first. What we do know is that the Kakhovka Dam, which was blown up in Kherson, again an area in Ukraine, was blown apart. It was breached. This particular dam was breached. And so this particular dam is on the river Dnieper, a major river of Europe. In fact, the fourth largest river of Europe. The river Dnieper, it originates in the Valdai Hills, of Russia. And Dnieper being a transboundary river, which means it crisscrosses many countries. So it starts from Russia, thereafter it enters Belarus, thereafter it enters Ukraine, and finally it drains into the Black Sea. So now that we know the course of the river, let's identify the place where this tragedy has occurred. So exactly the place here is the Kakhovka Dam, and essentially if you look at this particular river bank, the bank to the left, all of it is controlled by Russia, whereas the bank to the right is controlled by Ukraine. Now we do not know at this particular moment as to which party is responsible for this act. Whether it was Russia, whether it was Ukraine, well, there is no evidence that gives it away. Obviously, we have the fog of war also involved, so credible information is difficult to come by. So we will skip that discussion altogether. We are not here to assign blame as to which country did it, but regardless of whoever did it, now lies in the crosshair of this particular tragedy, not just the lives of people, but also, like I told you, natural ecosystem, the flora, the fauna of this whole area is looking at being compromised, not just for the short term, but also for the long term. So if you look at it now, this is the area that I'm talking about. And so this is the Nova Kakhovka Dam. It essentially is responsible, this dam is responsible for giving water supply to the area of Crimea. Around 80% of the whole water supply of Crimea comes from the Nova Kakhovka Dam. So obviously, now that the dam has been compromised, the dam has been broken, you are looking at a water crisis that will develop soon in Crimea. So now that we have understood where the topic has, the whole tragedy has occurred, one more thing that we should understand and take forward here is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Europe's biggest nuclear plant. Now, concerns were raised as soon as the news broke out that the dam had been breached, well, that the nuclear plant would also be threatened, because obviously you need a cooling source for the nuclear plant. However, those fears have been allayed, because as you can see that just in vicinity of the nuclear plant there is a freshwater source. So, for the time being, the nuclear plant is safe. There is no possibility of a nuclear meltdown as a consequence of the breaching of this dam. However, what's undeniable is that all of this area is now looking at being severely compromised. Okay, so now let's go forward and have a look at this particular photo that I have for you. So this is the dam that I'm talking about. You can see the breach here, water gushing out from here all sides. This is the Dnieper river. So now that the dam has been breached, water going out at immense rate, lot of discharge happening, unplanned discharge of water happening in the lower lying areas, and finally all of that now flushing into the Black Sea. Now for a moment you have to understand that, well, this was a sensitive installation. After all, this was the place wherein just in the nearby areas you have had massive artillery shelling because of the Russia conflict, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So essentially now, one possibility could be that maybe it's not an act of sabotage, maybe the structural integrity of the dam was compromised. Second one that we know is that because it was a sensitive installation, lot of fuel, lot of particular oil-specific goods were stored in this particular dam. Now with the breaching of this dam, all of that, close to 600 gallons of oil, has now travelled and is now going towards the Black Sea. It will drain itself finally into the Black Sea. So eventually, this catastrophe as an environment catastrophe just keeps growing bigger and bigger. So not only is the risk of flooding, there is also the risk of oil pollution. Okay. So let's go forward now and have a look at the reactions that came in first. Of course, yes, SSB aspirant, the dam was extremely strategically important. Again, like I told you, because it gives fresh water to Crimea. It is also supposed to be the checkpoint in terms of a safeguard for the nuclear power plant. So obviously you have a dam that is playing a center point in this whole conversation, and now with that having been breached, now that with the dam having been broken and destroyed, well, several domino effects could be expected in the days to come. So let's look at the reactions that came in. Firstly, from the Ukraine side, well, straight away assigning blame to Russia, and from the Russian side, well, calling it a terrorist attack and assigning blame to the Ukrainians. No surprises there, obviously. Okay, because this would be considered to be a strategic blunder. Regardless of whichever side did it, this is an act that will not get support of any credible stakeholder. So obviously both of the parties now washing their hands of the disaster. We may know who did it, we may never know. But again, like what I told you right at the very beginning, it's completely undeniable that an environmental catastrophe could possibly be unfolding in this theatre of war that has been going on for the good part of the last year and a half. Okay, so let's go forward now and understand why this particular dam is important. So like I told you, firstly, it was on the Dnieper or Dnipro river in Kherson Oblast, Ukraine. Now from the exam perspective, you would know that knowing of areas is very important, specifically from the UPSC prelims perspective, especially for those who would be using these lectures for the international affairs bit. You would be best advised to make a mental note of where Kherson Oblast is, again a part of Ukraine. And I have given you the whole route of the river Dnipro, starting from the Valdai Hills in Russia, thereafter Belarus, thereafter Ukraine, and finally draining into the Black Sea. So this territory has been under Russian control since the invasion. So now obviously prima facie the blame is being assigned to the Russians. The Russians claim that, well, a sabotage act could have been carried out by the Ukrainian side. Again, blame game, we are not interested in that. However, going forward, we understand that the primary purpose of the dam was hydroelectric power generation, irrigation and navigation. So the low lying, after you had crossed the particular dam, all of the water channels were freely used for navigation. Okay, now that also stands compromised. The deep water channels created by the downstream flow allowed shipping up and down the river. So it was a mode of transport. Now obviously with such huge amount of water coming in such a short span of time, it remains to be seen as to what happens in the long-term future of the Dnipro river as a mode of transport too. Like I told you again, water from the Kakhovka reservoir supplies for the cooling of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So obviously, the first concern of the global world was, well, are we looking at another Fukushima? Are we looking at another Chernobyl? Thankfully, those fears right now stand allayed by the competent authorities. That has been put out. The statement has been put out that there is no problems with the nuclear plant as such. However, that the same cannot be said about Ukraine and the whole area, starting from the Kakhovka Dam right up till Black Sea. So let's go forward now and have a look at this whole accusation of ecocide. That because of this terrorist activity, well, obviously human lives are going to be majorly affected, primarily affected. But then at the same time, you're looking at probably extinction or irreversible changes in the whole way this ecosystem is set up. So the first one is that you are risking destroying the rich animal habitats and plant species. In fact, this area is a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. So obviously a World Heritage Site now being compromised is not good news by any measure of any standards. So the ecologists are already predicting that the Black Sea Biosphere Reserve, home to thousands of species, and the Oleshki sands will be the most affected by the flooding. So this is obviously the UNESCO World Heritage Site. We'll talk about this. And then we have the Oleshki sands just near the Black Sea. Both of these are going to be compromised as a result of this terrorist activity. So the water reserve just near the dam, you obviously had a huge amount of water that was stored. So that was known as the Kakhovka water reservoir, which existed above the dam, was used by the migrating birds. It was in fact a bird site. All of these birds would be traveling, nesting there. Well, now that is also compromised. The floods could carry pollutants, like I told you. That the particular dam was storing oil and lubricants and ammunition and all of that, now draining fast and furiously, not just through this whole sensitive, ecologically sensitive area, but also to Black Sea. So it is expected to severely affect marine life in the area. What we do know right now is that close to 600 to 800 gallons of oil is currently en route to what can possibly be described as a very sensitive ecological area. So the natural parks created with the goal of preserving threat or unique animal plant species, well, you obviously have some species from the red list that are now found in this particular biosphere reserve. Okay. And then there is something that we need to understand called the Emerald Network. So obviously two concepts that require quick understanding before we go forward in this discussion. Number one is the IUCN Red List, and number two is the Emerald Network. So let's quickly have a look at both of them first. So IUCN, obviously now that we know, is the list of threatened species, a comprehensive information about the risk status of animals, fungus and plants, including all. So if it's threatened, near threatened, how far is the risk associated with that particular species? Well, all of that is noted down in the IUCN Red List. However, when you talk about the Emerald Network, well, essentially, the Emerald Network is essentially to do with an ecological network of areas of special conservation. Primarily, the Emerald Network is related to areas of interest in Europe. Of late, a couple of areas in Africa also have been identified. Once these areas are identified, obviously a lot of stakeholder participatory management process is done, lot of education, lot of funding, lot of spending resources to make sure that the fauna and flora and fauna of that particular area is conserved and preserved. Now, with this massive flooding having happened, well, all of this Emerald Network and the work that they have done stands compromised. At the same time, we are looking at particular species that might possibly be going extinct or might have been lost already. So this is, again, like I told you at the very beginning of this lecture, this is turning out to be environmentally sensitive issue that is now fast snowballing into a catastrophe. Okay? So now that we have understood the Emerald Network, the source of which, well, it owes its origin to the Berne Convention. Do make a note of this because again, this would be new information for many of you, one that you would be best advised to quickly take a note of. Let's go forward, but before I do, my dear viewers, my dear students, my dear audience, well, I am available on Instagram. If you'd like my analysis, if you like my presentations, do consider joining me on my Telegram channel, in fact, wherein I share a lot of interesting contents, articles that will catch your attention, that will inform you, educate you, and so I look forward to hosting you on my Telegram channel. Scan this particular code and I shall see you there. All right, continuing with our discussion on the species at risk now. Obviously, now that I've painted the picture for you that you are looking at a massive environment catastrophe already, let's look at the species that are possibly threatened or are going to be specifically threatened with this. So you're looking at a rare ant species, okay? And you're looking at these particular varieties, these particular species of rare ants that are going to be lost. You're also looking at Nordman's birch mouse. The 70% of the global population of Nordman's birch mouse is found in the Black Sea Biosphere Reserve. Now again, with this massive flooding, we do not know what remains of the Nordman's birch mouse. Similarly, the sand mole rat, this particular animal here, and the steppe viper, which is very famous in Ukraine, by the way. So the steppe viper and the sand mole rat, again, two particular species that will be directly threatened with this breach, this destruction of the Kakhovka Dam that has either been done by Ukraine or by Russia or by some third party that possibly wants to catalyze the situation for their own benefit. Again, we do not know the information regarding that. Okay. So we are also looking at problems with fish spawning. So this is the time when fish would be spawning in the underbeds of the Dnieper area, the Dnieper River. But with this, again, massive outflow of water happening, well, fish spawning is going to be severely compromised. The benthic population. Benthic is the deep sea or the deep water ecosystem that exists. Well, obviously, with water now going shallow, with water levels now falling, benthic population will essentially look at a future wherein they probably would be required to readjust or they will probably be going extinct again. You're also looking at forests, birch and oak forests, massive trees that have existed for long there. Well, their survivability is an issue too. And here is a very startling stat that I have for you. Have a look at this particular stat. That 48 objects of the Nature Reserve Fund, which includes 1 biosphere reserve, 3 national parks, 1 regional park, 16 reserves, 3 nature sanctuaries, park monuments, all of that included in the biosphere reserve. So you can understand the importance of this area. Okay, war tactics aside, this area was of pristine importance, prime importance. All of that now standing compromised again because of this terrorist activity, which is why we are having this discussion that whether indeed the breaching of the Kakhovka Dam is eventually leading to an ecocide, a complete wipeout of the ecosystem that exists right from the Kakhovka reservoir up until the mouth of the Dnieper River as it meets Black Sea. So the Black Sea Biosphere Reserve, like I told you, a part of the UNESCO World Network of Biosphere Reserves. Extreme importance is what we can only understand by that statement, that its survivability is intrinsically linked to the survivability of the people of that place, and well, now that stands compromised too. So going ahead, but before I do, my dear students, one question that I have for you is that in terms of the civil service preparation, one pain point that most students face and will be facing in the days to come after having seen the UPSC Prelims 2023 paper is that CSAT requires extensive preparation. You have to go in all out, 50-50. in terms of allocating your resources, your energy, not just for paper 1 but also for paper 2. Which is why StudyIQ IAS has come up with this 100 classes package in terms of preparing a student for CSAT. You are going to have individual mentors, some of the best faculty, individuals who have extensive experience of not just clearing examinations, knowing what it takes to clear examinations, and then communicating it to the student. So, if you'd like to join us for this particular course, join us, use this code BALIVE, the course beginning on the 30th of June at 3:30 p.m. So, I'd see hopefully many of you there in this particular course. Alright, with that we come to the end of this small presentation, as I wanted to communicate across to you the ecological effects, the ecological ramifications of what can indeed be described as a pathetic terrorist activity. The blowing up, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam by whichever aggressor, again leading to what could possibly be a complete wipeout of many species, not just flora and fauna, but also near threatened species, species that exist on the IUCN Red List, and the whole work of the Emerald Network now standing compromised. On that note, it's a wrap from all of us here at StudyIQ IAS English. Till I see you with another such discussion tomorrow again at 9.